Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the briefing for the Technical Associate for ECD Infrastructure. Today, we are going to provide a little bit more in-depth information around this opportunity and the call for proposals. So we're just going to flight some slides so that we could just go through some of that details. And then thereafter, we will have a question and answer session where we will be answering some of your questions. So while we are just presenting on some of the just the key elements of this role, you can pop your questions into the Q&A section, or at the end we would take some questions as well. So we'll go through the Q&A and we'll also take some questions at the end as well. Okay, so let me just flight. Okay, so the infrastructure technical associate, this is someone that will be joining our team. So the call that we did put out was for individuals, or it could be a group of individuals, group of individual consultants that put in a proposal together, or it could be an organization. So just to give you a little bit of background on who Ilifa is. So basically, Ilifa Labantwana is an organization that is committed to quality early learning childhood development for all children, that supports caregivers and creates a sustainable livelihoods for women and builds an equitable and prosperous South Africa for all. We use our technical expertise and in-depth understanding of government systems combined with evidence, data, and collaboration to enhance early childhood development ecosystems, capacity to deliver essential services and care to children. And Ilifa is currently working with the Department of Basic Education's Infrastructure Department to improve the expenditure and effective implementation of ECD infrastructure maintenance grant, and as well as align the infrastructure delivery so that it better enables ECD programs to meet regulated standards. Just in terms of the context and why we had put out this call is that half of early learning programs identified through the ECD census are unregistered, and they operate outside of government's monitoring systems and outside of government's monitoring systems from social workers and EHPs and also government support, which means that if they can't get registered, they will then not have access to the necessary support, including and also very importantly, the subsidy. A lot of research over the years has shown that infrastructure and health and safety are the main areas that act as barriers for early learning programs to meet or to achieve the regulated ECD standards. There's also an ECD infrastructure maintenance grant, which is a component of the conditional grant that is intended to actually support programs to meet these regulatory standards. And this is also why this maintenance grant is in existence. And this maintenance grant is used to upgrade ECD infrastructure. It also provides new builds and the procurement of health and safety pack. And all these interventions together is intended to support programs to meet the regulated ECD norms and standards. But with the function shift from Department of Social Development to Department of Basic Education, that the ECD infrastructure function now forms part of the bigger infrastructure or DBE infrastructure teams, which means that a large part of infrastructure within these teams traditionally focus on large-scale school infrastructure projects with high-value budgets and complex implementation processes. But if you actually look at ECD and the way ECD infrastructure is implemented, the infrastructure is basically, it operates outside of government, so it's small sort of private programs that operate outside of government and are usually located within communities. So they're often delivered out of homes. They're typically smaller, um, in higher volumes, which means that you've got this large school infrastructure or these large schools that are like located within communities, a lot less fewer than ECD programs, but you've got a lot more smaller ECD programs located in communities, sometimes even close together. And the focus is basic maintenance, minor renovations, that requires different approaches to planning, and procurement, especially around infrastructure. So the purpose of this role is to appoint an individual or team that will work very closely with Ilifa systems team, to support us in the planning, procurement, and implementation of the ECD infrastructure maintenance grant. Also to help co-create and embed the process. So as the processes are developed, to embed the process with DBE and provinces to fit the regulated ECD norms and standards, as well as to assess the integration with the early childhood development administration and reporting system with existing infrastructure systems. So there's already existing infrastructure systems within the basic education infrastructure teams, but also at the same time, there is a ECD information system that's been built for the sector. And it's looking at how do we start thinking about the integration with this big information system for ECT together what is already existing within these infrastructure teams. Then also it's also to support and enable provinces to adopt and implement and sustain improved processes. So that's the purpose of the role and what we're needing from this particular role. The contract, so with the contract information, it is a duration of 2 years. Location is Cape Town, Johannesburg, or Pretoria. So it's a hybrid position. Largely, the team is spread across these three areas. So, and a lot of the work is done in a hybrid fashion. So it would be as coming onto the team and supporting the team, it can also be done in the same way. This content is open to individuals, group of individuals, as I've mentioned, group of consultants who want to put in a proposal together, or an organization. So just around the scope of work. So the scope of work is covering a few buckets of work. The first is infrastructure alignment. And here under infrastructure alignment, what is really critical is aligning the infrastructure assessment tool to the regulated norms and standards. So it's making sure that infrastructure tools that is used in the infrastructure team within DBE is aligned to the regulated norms and standards, so that when upgrades are done and the maintenance grant is used to support these upgrades, it's done in alignment with the norms and standards, so that the program that's getting the upgrades can actually meet the norms and standards for ECD. Then it's also mapping the infrastructure programs from end to end. And once that is mapped, which is basically included the planning process, the procurement process, the implementation process. And once that's mapped and agreed upon, it's also helping to standardize the programs across provinces. Then it's also planning ahead of budget cycles. So it's also ensuring that planning is done within provinces ahead of budget cycles and being able to embed the necessary reforms provincially or within every province. Then the next bucket is supply chain, and supply chain is really looking at documenting current procurement process. So understanding what the current procurement processes are, identifying where improvements can be made, and then also proposing actionable solutions. But remember, with all these pieces of work, it's also working with the Ilifa team and supporting the Ilifa team to do this. And then also supporting the provinces to manage the maintenance grant procurement. So once the process of being mapped, it's standardized, it's basically supporting the provinces on how do they manage the maintenance grant procurement a little bit better. Then the other bucket is around digital systems. So as I mentioned before, there is a system called ECAS, which is basically the ECD information system, which is around reporting and monitoring of the ECD sector and various key activities that happens within the ECD sector. And then there's also DBE systems specifically around infrastructure that is used to monitor infrastructure, like, for example, the IDMS, the Infrastructure Delivery Management System. So there are key specific systems that are very specific to the infrastructure team. And here it's really assessing the integration of these systems and assessing the fit, the integration, and whether there needs to be some interoperability between these systems. Then it's also looking at the scope of the maintenance grant and functionality on eCares, because it's supposed to be a specific module on maintenance and infrastructure on this ECD infrastructure system. And it's looking at what could that module kind of look like? What needs to go into that module? What do we need to be reporting on? And with that, you're kind of looking also at the design business process. So what does the business process look like for infrastructure, and then building that module for the EK's system, and then supporting testing and piloting. So that is really about when the infrastructure module or the maintenance grant module is built within this big ECD system, information system, then that means user supporting the testing of this module within provinces and piloting that module in provinces. So being able to support that process as well. Then the other bucket is around business process, and that really looks at validating the high-level mapped business process with provincial infrastructure teams for the EKs. So it's looking at what that infrastructure module look like, what is the business process that will go with that, and being able to socialize that with the provincial infrastructure teams to get buy-in, and also to understand whether what else needs to be included there as well. And then also the individual, the team, or the organization needs to be able to run engagements to close knowledge gaps that affect detailed design. So where business process has been designed or high level maps has been designed, having constant engagements with the province to make sure that any knowledge gaps of the business process is closed. And then also consolidating provincial feedback. So a lot of the time there will be engagements with provinces around the business process, around building the infrastructure model for the EKs, and being able to consolidate that feedback so that feedback can be worked into the design process, and then also secure formal provincial approval. So supporting the team to be able to secure formal provincial approvals, especially where designing of the infrastructure model for the ECD information system is concerned. And then define roles and responsibilities across the infrastructure value chain. So this includes functions that are held outside of government by strategic partners where appropriate. So it's looking at who holds what role specifically across the value chain. So that could be government departments, other government departments, or strategic partners. Then the last bucket is really around capacity building and change management, because a lot of the work that this role will be supporting would be designing business processes, embedding those business processes, building, supporting the development of an infrastructure model within this ECD information system. So with that also comes change management and also building capacity. So the business capacity bucket is really looking at designing and delivering training, change management for DBE, and as well as DBE national, provincial, and district infrastructure teams on the revised business process. So it's looking at designing training, looking at what change management is needed, and being able to deliver that to the various levels of government for infrastructure teams. Then also convening targeted briefing sessions to align teams and clarifying roles. So that's really looking at When the infrastructure module is designed, or even around business processes, it's looking at how do you align the various teams that has a stake in the business process or in the value chain, and being able to clarify that roles. And then also engaging and capacitating provincial and district officials on the processes, on the business process, infrastructure business process, as well as the new eCares infrastructure model. And then lastly is to develop a phased rollout or implementation plan for revised business process. So where business processes will be designed, where a value chain will be designed, it's about also developing a plan on the rollout of training, of change management, of capacitating around the revised business process, and whatever other elements would be included in ensuring that the revised business process is embedded within these infrastructure teams. Then just coming to the timelines and milestones. So for this role and the 2-year contract, there's just key milestones that we've sort of centered around the pieces of work. And that includes for month 1 and 2, that's really looking at stakeholder engagement and process mapping. So that's supporting the team on developing the business process, mapping whatever infrastructure value chain processes they are, and then also doing stakeholder engagements. Between month 3 and 4, here we would look at the tools, reviewing tools, revising the tools according to regulated norms and standard where possible, also doing co-creation and validation of this tool. So working with infrastructure teams to revise their tools and also validating these tools. So making sure that these tools work sufficiently in the field. And then between month 5 and 7, it's looking at the eCares design and scoping. So the scoping of the infrastructure module, and looking at possibilities of infrastructure integration with others, with the other modules and systems. So it's really looking at what could this module look like? Could there be integration with the existing infrastructure systems? So month 5 to 7 is all about design and scoping. Then month 8 to 9 is capacity building and training rollout of the business process. So here it's looking at what are the business process, is there a revised business process, and how do we start embedding that business process within the different provincial teams. And month 10 to 12, that's testing the business processes. So it may just be that we roll out, we embed, we're socializing the process, and then testing the business process amongst maybe a small team of provincial officials, for example, to see that it actually works. And then month 13 to 24, that's really supporting the rollout of both business process, eCares module, doing change management, and then the final evaluation and transition to provincial ownership. So it's making sure that the infrastructure module is designed, the business processes are socialized, and how do we then transfer ownership, and making sure that there's full ownership of the business process and eCares module by the provincial infrastructure teams. Then what we require, consultant requirements. So this is a senior role, and what we're needing, whether it's an organization, whether it is a group of individuals, or whether it is an individual, it is a senior role. And I think the expectation is to really have a senior person lead this project, even if you're an organization. The core capabilities that's required either in the individual or across a team is have some IT or data and business process mapping. So knowing how to do business process mapping, have an understanding of government systems. So that would be the infrastructure delivery management system, also the infrastructure reporting system, and the systems that the infrastructure teams currently uses. And then the demonstrated experience in the infrastructure and planning and execution. So having some idea of infrastructure planning and execution within government. Then having the ability to engage with provinces effectively. So engage and being able to work with provincial officials effectively. And then experience working within or with government entities. So you might have worked alongside government entities or done work for government entities or worked within government, but you need to have experience around working with government. And then expertise in facilitating workshops, user accepted testing, and that's really around being able to pilot the particular infrastructure modules within eCare, so user accepted testing, and also supporting digital adoption. So that's really around change management. And then also a demonstrated ability to effectively manage multiple stakeholders, because this role will be dealing with government, will be dealing with strategic partners. So it will be dealing with multiple stakeholders. So really having a demonstrated ability to be able to effectively deal with these multiple stakeholders. And then just ways of working. We've mentioned hybrid model, which is sort of Ilifa's way of working. And then also there will be weekly contact time with the Ilifa team, because you'll be working this will be working very closely with the Ilifa team. And then also engagements with DBE. So this in Pretoria. So it may mean a little bit of travel and also provincial infrastructure units as well. So this will be dealing with DBE at national and then also provincial infrastructure teams as well. And then just the travel expectation, it would be 1 or 2 visits to each provinces, all 9 provinces during the contract period. There may be slightly more travel, but I think this is just the general expectation. And then also occasional visits to selected ELP and selected ELPs. And this is just really around if, for example, we're developing a particular tool and we need to test that tool in field, there will be an expectation that there may be occasional visits or occasional travel to specific ELPs to be able to test and help pilot specific tools. So that comes to just the end of my presentation. We will open up, I don't know, Tembi, do you want to add anything before I close the presentation, before I open up to questions?
No, Simone, I think you have covered everything effectively.
Thank you. So I am going to open up to questions. I will start with the Q&A. So the first question on the Q&A is, so the question is asking, so Ilifa has already been appointed by DBE for this work. So just to say, we haven't been appointed by DBE. We do have a working relationship and an MOU to support DBE on this work. So it's not an appointment, so to say, in terms of a context, the MOU to support them with this work. And yes, so the answer is yes. We've already got a working relationship with DBE to support the work. The next question is 42,000 programs identified and 60K operating. Can you elaborate more on this? So I'm just thinking about this question. So I think there has been, and maybe this is talking to the ECD census. I'm going to answer this question, that there has been 42,000 programs identified, but there are some programs that that have been unregistered and probably haven't been identified through the census. So there is sort of a roundabout or a rounded off number of about 60,000 programs that have not truly been identified, and hoping that by the Banapele process and the Banapele campaign is that we'll see a lot more of these programs coming through the regulatory net. Do you want to add?
I just want to add onto that. So the ECD census, I think, is the one that I identified about 42,000. But if you also recall that when the time the census happened, it was just after COVID, and there were some programs that could not be counted during that time. And also there are some programs that operate from their household and might have been missed during that process. So I think we are just estimating that based on some of our modeling that some of our colleagues have done to just see how many children, I think based on the actual census of how many children are reported to attend some kind of a program. So we estimate that there might be about 60,000 programs.
Thanks, Tembi. There's another question that says, is there an expected level of effort that Ilifa and DB anticipate for the technical associate role? Or should bidders propose what they see as appropriate based on the scope? So on an individual, this role as an individual will be full-time, a full-time contract for 2 years. With a group of consultants, I think that's a different format, and I think you can work on a full-time. I think it's going to be a different format, and I think you can propose maybe what that looks like. But maybe work on as an individual, what we are looking is for a full-time role. For a group of consultants and for an organization, your level of effort's going to be, I'm assuming if you're going to be using multiple people that will bring in multiple expertise, your level of effort will work slightly a bit differently, in which I think access to people would obviously work slightly differently. So, you can put around what you think is appropriate in terms of level of effort and access to people around the different pieces of work. And if you contracted, we'll have a conversation about what that could look like, and negotiate around what that could look like. Tembi, do you want to take a few questions?
Yes, I think there was question earlier around which provinces are you targeting, or is this for the entire country? So this would definitely be for all the provinces. There are some parts where Simone mentioned in the presentation about some piloting that would obviously be negotiated on which areas, let's say, we would be testing or which part of the provinces. But the work is entirely supposed to support all the provinces. Um, I'm not sure. Let me see if there are other questions.
So maybe I'll take this one. Do you have a financial budget cap? So for an individual consultant, the budget is about 2 million. We do know that for a group of individual consultants and also for an organization, the format may look slightly different. So I would suggest that if you're a group of individual consultants organization, you can keep in mind that the budget is about probably 2 million for an individual, and then you can work around in terms of budget and add what you or your budget in the actual in your actual proposal, and we can negotiate around there.
There is another question. Is it mandatory for a team to have government experience? I think that is a key experience that we require for the position, because you would need to have some understanding of some of their systems. So it is important. Yes. Can we bring in a specialist at different phases of can we bring in a specialist at different phases if the proposed team needs an extra resource? I think it would be good for us to be able to see what the full team looks like and what kind of experience, because our decision is going to be based on the expertise that are going to be brought on. So if you're coming together as different people, that's acceptable. Yes. Sim, do you want to take over?
What do you think, what do you see as the biggest risk to success of this assignment, and how would you want the technical associate to help mitigate that? Um, I think there's a I think maybe not risk, but also challenges, and that is the ability to be able to work with government and provinces, and the ability to be able to embed a process that where there's already sort of a deep or a comfort with an existing process. So we already know that the maintenance grant need support in terms of improvement, and it's about being able to shift to being able to shift, you know, yeah, to being able to shift their mindsets towards the embedded or the revised process. So I think change management is going to be, it may be a challenge, and it is a big part also of this work because we can revise processes, but if it's not embedded and it's not implemented correctly, that we can it doesn't make a difference to the work we're trying to do. So I think change management and the ability of, I think, officials to be able to shift their way of working, I think is also a big assist to our work. I don't know if Tembi wants to add anything.
I think you've covered it. I think also procurement could be an issue. Most provinces struggle with procurement, especially of the ECD maintenances and upgrading. So that could be an area that would require a little bit of creative thinking. And just moving on, I think, Simone, when you answered the budget question, there were additional questions that came up after around that. So is that 2 million per year? I think the 2 million was referring to 2 million across the 2 years if it's an individual. There's a question around government consulting fees rates or NGO rates or private rates. So we are a non-governmental organization, and this role is being funded by our organization. So I would think NGO rates. Is there a budget cap per year or for the whole project? I think we hadn't gotten to that point. Sim, do you want to come in?
Well, I think if it's in individual, I think that would be, based on consulting fees. But I think if it's a group or an organization, I think that you can add to your proposal and show how that can be worked over 2 years. Yeah, how the budget can be worked over 2 year period.
I think also someone mentioned that they missed the how to apply. So you would have to submit a proposal with the costing of the proposal. And I think this is due on the 12th of September, so on Friday. You'd have to submit the proposal as well as a costing of it.
There's a question, how many days should the lead person be available for over the 2 years? I think this is dependent on the skills of the lead person and how much of the work they would be driving. So if it is a group of consultants, if it is an organization, it also depends on the amount of or what aspects of the work they're going to be driving. So if they've got the most skills and they're going to be driving most of the work, they would actually need to be most available to support. So I think that is something is going to have to be worked out and I think thought through from your organization perspective. I think the timeline may help you just around the pieces of work and what will be done when. Yeah, I think that's something that and can be negotiated a bit later. But I think at this point it's difficult to say. I think given organization and the skills that that lead person would actually be holding. Because we can't, I think, have a situation where, for example, a big part of our work is maybe change management and the lead person has the change management skills and they're sort of not available for most of the time. And then how
So
will
the
functionality and cost be evaluated? So there will be, as part of the contract, there will be deliverables, and the consultant, whether it's an organization, a consultant, individual consultant, group of consultants, as well as the organization they work will work towards deliverables, and that will be agreed upon in the contract. You want to take some questions, Timby? You on mute?
Yes, I can. Will the associate be expected to work directly with provinces or mainly through the DBE's national infrastructure team? So there will be some work together with the provinces, but our main relationship is with the national DBE. So you will work with both provinces and national, but the national team will open doors for us to be able to communicate and to identify the right people that we need to be engaging in the provinces. So it is very much a collaborative process. The systems team also will be available to support the consultant or the organization that we'll be working with. So we won't leave you to sort of figure it out and identify the right people. So there will be a team, and national will also be leading us as well. Um, So is the application for team consultants different from the individual application? No, we would expect the same application. So it's I see Svetlana's popped in a document onto the chat, which is our terms of reference. So if you haven't seen it, there is a list of the requirements for in terms of application. So it would be the same for both. Um,
If you have working experience for an MPO, so we also specifically looking for experience with government, because this role is government facing along with the systems team. So if you have experience with an MPO, I think we really need experience with government and working with government, helping to embed government systems, especially some knowledge around government systems. And then there's a question, 2 million for 2 years, the entire country, and how many centers do you predict? So a lot of this is working with provincial departments. And yeah, so working with provincial departments, supporting the processes and being able to embed the processes. So when we talk about the entire country, you're working with government departments, but you're not necessarily often traveling. You might need some travel to some provinces, but you're not traveling every week to provinces. It's a lot of meetings, maybe online meetings, kind of trying to help embed systems. So when we're talking about, it's not travel to a lot of country, you just working with a lot of provincial departments, conversations, emails, etc. And also you're working with national, you're supporting national to also help embed processes. So you're working with a team that's also supporting this processes as well. And then how frequently is provincial travel anticipated, and are there any specific expectations for in-persons versus remote engagement? So provincial travel, I think we said at least twice to each province over the contract period. There may be a little bit more travel dependent on how things roll out, what implementation looks like, how much more engagements we would need. But we don't foresee a lot of travel. In terms of remote working, a lot of the team also works remotely. We will come together face to face, you know, now and then in every maybe few weeks or maybe every 2 months. But a lot of our work is done remotely via online engagements.
Um,
Okay, so I think the question is what government experience would be advantageous, as in which sector? So I think any government experience, I think you must have experience working with government officials at various levels, because this will also require you to work with government officials at various levels, but also having a keen understanding of government systems. So what will be advantageous is procurement processes. If you've been involved in any infrastructure projects, that's very advantageous. But procurement processes, and also working to understand business process within government. I think that will also be advantageous as well. Do you want to take this,
so
Divya?
the other question, are disbursements covered in the 2 million budget cap? So travel is not included in the 2 million. So
For
if you're an
organizations and
individual, yes. So if you're
yeah.
an individual, then we would cover the cost for the travel and all of those other things. I think we have tackled a lot of the questions. Anything else?
That's the last of the questions. Okay. So I just would like to thank everyone for joining, and hope we've answered all your questions. So thanks for joining. I'll put out all your questions, and we look forward to receiving proposals.
Thank you.